So in this video, you guys are going to be figuring out how to find circumference and area of circles, which you may have already learned. And the last 5 minutes or so of the video is presenting you with 2 application problems on circles and having you try to figure out how to do it. Now, the majority of this video, or not the majority, but a good portion of this video is the explanation to those word problems. So the first, I would say about 7.5 minutes of this video is what is area, what is circumference, how to find area, how to find circumference. And then the last portion is having you try to apply it to word problems. Now the application piece, in my opinion, is the most important part. However, you can't apply unless you know the formulas and how to find area and circumference. So if the last part of this video is confusing, then you're going to come into class with questions, and that's really going to be the bulk of what we're going to be practicing in class. So here's the formula for area of a circle. It's really important that any time that you see pi, the Greek symbol, that you use the pi button on your calculator. Because the pi button on your calculator extends pi to some decimal place way larger or way longer than we would type in. So you're not going to use 3.14 or 22/7 or whatever approximation. You're going to use the pi button on your calculator. And you're going to remember that when you're finding the area, you're finding the inside space of a circle. So if you look at the diagram, the blue diagram, all that blue shaded stuff would be what you would find when you were finding the area. And the area of a circle is pi times radius squared. So pi is a constant, basically. It's an irrational number, but it's the same irrational number every time. And r is going to change. Your radius is going to change based on the size of the circle. So the only thing you really need to find area is to know what the radius is. So if you're given the diameter, which is the green thing, you'd have to divide it in 2 to find the radius, and then plug the radius in, square it, and multiply it by pi to get the area. I just included that diagram to show you why the formula for the area of a circle is pi r squared. So if you look at the area of a circle formula, and you look at the green and the orange pieces, slices, what you'd notice is if you kind of thought of this as a rectangle, that the bottom would be half of the circumference and the top would be half of the circumference, and the length, or the width, however you want to call it, would be the radius. So basically it's showing you how they came to the area formula. You don't have to know this. It's just sometimes it's really interesting for us to explore where things came from. Instead of just memorizing area equals pi times radius squared, sometimes it's interesting to look at where it came from and how they derived these formulas. So in this slide, it's just talking about circumference, and the circumference of the circle is how far around the circle. So it's basically like the perimeter of a circle. And there are 2 different formulas. Well, they're not different. They're the same, but they're just represented by different things. So sometimes you'll see people use pi d, which is pi times diameter. And sometimes you'll see people use 2 pi r, which is basically saying instead of multiplying by d, I'm multiplying by 2 times r. So basically, if you're given radius, you're going to have to multiply by 2 to get diameter anyway. So it's almost like you're using this formula when you have radius and this formula when you have diameter. You just may not be thinking that you're using this formula when you have radius, because if you use pi d, you just automatically multiply radius by 2. On the state test formula sheet, they do give you the c equals 2 pi r formula. So I just want you to be familiar with both and see that they're really the same formula. One's just using diameter and one's just using 2 radii, which are the same thing. The other piece is, if you look at this diagram, it's showing you circumference is all the way around, diameter is all the way across the circle in the middle through the center of the circle, and radius comes out of the center of the circle. It's also showing you that pi is circumference divided by diameter, which should make sense because if circumference equals pi times diameter, then if I divide by d, right, then pi would equal circumference divided by diameter. So here are 2 just basic area and circumference problems, just so that I can model for you how to do it. and then you should be good to go. Many of you will probably already know how to do this. So it says the directions say find the area and circumference, round to the nearest tenth. So in this case, I know my radius is 8. So if I'm finding their circumference, I'm going to do, in this case, 2 pi r. So 2 pi times 8, which means I'm going to do 16 pi. And notice that I'm going through the steps and I'm getting to a place that has a number times pi before I actually multiply by pi. So my last step in every one of these is going to be to multiply by pi. I'm not going to multiply by pi until that last step for a number of reasons. Number one, sometimes the problem will ask you to keep it in terms of pi. And number two, if I round too soon, sometimes my answers are not as precise as they could be. And when I multiply 16 by pi, I got a really long decimal, and I round it to 50.3 if I'm rounding to the tenths, and that would be meters. Again, I'm going to do this one, but area. So for area, it's now going to be pi r squared. I'm still going to be using the same r, so area is going to equal pi times 8 squared. That's going to equal 64 pi. Notice I'm still keeping it in terms of pi until the very last step. And now I'm going to go on my calculator and do 64 times pi. And I get the area to be approximately 201.1 if I round it. And then now it's going to be meters squared because I'm doing a meter times a meter. I'm doing 8 times 8. In this step, I'm doing 8 times 8, which is going to be 64 meters squared. So that's one example. I'm going to do the other example. So in this example, my diameter is 5, which means my radius is going to be 2.5 because I take my diameter and I divide it by 2. So again, for the circumference, I can use the diameter, so I have 5 pi. Hey, this is a way simpler problem because now all I have to do is multiply 5 times pi. And I get approximately 15.7. There's no units, so I'll just write units. So 15.7 units is my circumference. And for my area, the formula is not going to change. It's going to be pi r squared. So I'm going to do pi times 2.5 squared. So I'm going to square 2.5, and I'm going to get 6.25 pi. And then I'm going to multiply by pi. And I'm going to get approximately 19.6, and again it would be units squared because I don't know the units. So when I'm given information, it's very good for me to take, if I'm given my diameter, to find my radius because I'm going to need my radius all the time for my area. And remember to use the pi button in each of these situations. So for those of us that are using our phone, it is on our phone. If you have an iPhone, it is on your iPhone calculator if you turn your iPhone horizontally. So here are our favorite word problems. What I'm going to ask that you do is stop the video and think about these two problems. And I'm going to put the solutions in the video, but I would really, really like that you try your very hardest on these and come to some sort of problem-solving plan of action and think about what is being asked of you and then try your hardest. The second problem is actually maybe an easier problem for you to figure out than the first one, but I would really like you guys to pause the video and try for a few minutes, maybe more, and we'll discuss these tomorrow if there are issues. So you've paused the video, you've tried it. A bike has a diameter of 24 inches. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is draw my wheel and label my diameter. Notice yours should be a better looking circle. But I know that my diameter is 24 inches, so I know that. I know it's a circle because a bike wheel is a circle. If the bike travels 50 feet, approximately how many revolutions did it turn? So a revolution would be one full bike turn, otherwise known in what we're talking about as circumference. So I basically need to find the circumference of the circle to figure out how many feet it travels for one revolution. And then once I find that, how many feet it travels for one revolution, I can figure out how many it would go for 50 feet. I also have to realize that my diameter is in inches and my ultimate distance is in feet. So I'm going to do a pretty easy conversion and say that 24 inches equals 2 feet. So I also know that the circumference or the diameter of my circle is 24 inches, otherwise known as 2 feet. So I can say that my circumference equals pi d. So my circumference equals 2 pi, which is going to be approximately 6.3 or 6.28 blah 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 feet. So that means as a wheel turns one whole revolution, it is going to go approximately 6.3 feet. So if I want to know how many revolutions it makes in 50 feet, I would simply divide my 50 feet by 6.3 feet, because 6.3 feet represents one revolution. And when I divide 50 by 6.3 or 6.28, I get something very, very close to 8 revolutions. So if it's saying approximately how many revolutions did it turn, well, in this case, it turned approximately 8 revolutions. Because if you look at your number, it's 7.96 something, 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 something. So you know that's approximately 8 revolutions, which would also make sense if you just looked at this fraction and were like, well, I'm dividing 50 by approximately 6. So if we talk about the second word problem, a perfectly circular tablecloth. Okay, perfectly circular tablecloth. I'm drawing it. I'm drawing everything. I know that the circumference equals 37.7 feet. So that means I know that all the way around this equals 37.7 feet. Good. What is the area of the tablecloth? Okay, so I know I'm trying to find area. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, what information do I need to be able to find area? Okay, well, in order to find area, the only two things I need are pi and radius. Okay, so I need to find the radius. Well, I can do that because I know that the circumference formula is 2 pi r. And I know my circumference. And I know pi, and I know that 2 times pi is a constant. So really, if I just plug in 37.7 to circumference and I solve for r, now I'll be able to figure out what my radius is. So when I do this, then I divide both sides by 2 pi, and I get that the radius equals approximately 6. 6.0014. Okay, 6. So I know my radius is 6, which is good because now that I know my radius, I can figure out my area by doing area equals pi r squared. Wonderful. I know my radius is 6. I'm going to plug 6 in. So I get area equals 36 pi. And now I just have to multiply 36 by pi on my calculator, and I have the area of my tablecloth. So it looks like the area of my tablecloth is approximately 113.1, and they're feet squared, because area is feet squared, or inches squared, some sort of square unit. So again, if these word problems were confusing to you, we're doing lots of them tomorrow in class, and lots of them the next day in class. We're pretty much doing lots of them.